Hello and welcome back to the SRC podcast. And you heard that right, we are back after a few weeks break. We are back to preview another exciting round of Super Rugby Come reaction. Joining me, Big M, this evening is the one and only Mr. Robberies. How are we this evening?
All good, sir. All good. Nice and refreshed after the unusual mid-season break. We've gone for a FIFA-style winter break.
We really have, yeah. It's quite different, and especially seeing the likes of the Premiership, Championship still
Mm.
going on. It was it's a difficult one to really understand, but here we are. Usual members of this crowd: John Harris and Joe Wilson. I have to double check. I've totally forgotten what his last name is. I think I'm right. Have abandoned us this evening, but they will be back at some point. John is he's nursing. I think he's nursing a bit of an illness, so yeah, well soon, John. But other than that, there has been some form of action for some SRC players in the last couple of weeks. We've had something that I like to see: uh, development games for the regions involving a fair few youngsters and a lot of SRC talent. So the first one up, the Scarlets faced a tough Dragon side, to be fair, when you compare the team sheets. So you haven't spoken much yet, Rob. Run us through that. Well, have a look at that Dragons team for that Scarlets game, and who were the standouts? That we usually see week in week out here.
But you know, I think it was actually quite a decent sort of lineup in terms of how they've structured the side. Um, you only got to look at them and say 22 of them have played SRC slash Welsh Prem in the last sort of 2 years. Only three of the sort of the main squads are non-academy, so they haven't pulled in experienced ringers just to, grab a quick win here, and they've also not mixed in any sort of out and out first teamers that are chucking them back in just for the sake of chucking someone in. But I think someone who we're seeing start to get back to their best this season is Hugh Anderson at fullback. I know he didn't quite play the hour, but we're starting to see what he does really well, and what we've seen, especially at Wales 20s with him in the past, is that bit of a raw edge, coming out the fullback, very old school type. He'll attack from anywhere. He's got that physicality, that sort of power game, and it actually sort of worked really well with who else was around him. Di Richards and Mahoney. Again, obviously Mahoney partners Anderson at Pontypool this season. That sort of very powerful lineup. Lloyd Lewis, even though he's known for his pace, add some nice sort of strength out wide. So I think the scoreline was rather surprising: 73-21 and 11 tries in favour of the Dragons. I don't think many people would have sort of saw that, but I think what we've seen with this Dragon side is quite the developed squads, but also it was good to see so many people come on and have 25, 30 minutes. I mean, there's only one player that came off on the hour or after, and that was Josh Reynolds, who departed on 60 minutes. So everybody's got a decent chunk of game time. There wasn't any 2 minutes, 3 minutes at the end, which is great to see. Owen Conker, was good to see him back after I think it was a rib injury at the start of the season, and he's been held back a couple of weeks. He's been raring to go heading into this game, so I think they had a good eye on getting him back into fitness, um, in particular. And I got to be honest, I think seeing Joe Davis in there is quite an interesting one. I think the Dragons are definitely trying to get him back. He's obviously featured with Pontypool now for a couple of weeks in the SRC before sort of it closed off for the gap. Obviously, getting a bit of time in the developmental sort of aspect of it is definitely one for the Dragons fans to be pleased about.
Yeah. I mean, you can never knock a win when you're a Dragons fan, even if it is a development game. From Scar's perspective, looking at the team sheet, I think anyone who thought that we were going to be in with a chance of winning, you should have really taken a closer look. Vast majority of the boys in here were, first, second, third year, senior rugby. So vastly inexperienced, especially compared to that time. There was, a few still under 18s players. in this Scarlets lineup. Ocean Williams who started. You've got Joe Denman, Sean Jones. Who these are all boys that starred in a wonderful under 18 rag championship winning team, and they're still there this season. Don Kossuth, one who he did actually make his debut for Llandovery quite recently. He's still in that under 18 category. So I think that was the disappointment for the Scarlets. They just went for a basically more or less, barring the odd few players, and under 22, under 23 sort of style squad. And then when they saw they were up against, I think they were like, oh, we could have done with a few extra boys. Uh, Even saying that, they were missing quite like the likes of Josh Morse, Harry Thomas, Isaac Young. You know, these are boys that are fairly established at this now old Premiership SRC level they miss. So it's unfortunate for them. The only really shining light is probably Yori Badham getting 100-meter try, so that nice for the young lad. So he's Temby boy playing with the Quins. That's great for him. So was it the following week or like the week after or 2 weeks after we had another development game, but this one was styled quietly different. It was Ospreys development against Dragons A. Now, looking at the actual Dragons team sheet from development to A, I couldn't see a great deal of difference. Can you pick up the difference for me?
No, I think we've firmly seen the Dragons game plan in this sort of downtime, and that was they've got a core group of players they wanted to develop, wanted to either bring back the fitness and sort of see what they can do. And it actually worked out quite favourably. I think the way that the Ospreys ran with a bit more of a senior squad probably tells the Dragons more than if they put another 70 points on somebody. Um, and yeah, I think it's good to see a lot of these young and sort of that sort of they're just sprouting sort of players. The players that we're now starting to see come through into the professional setup, and those who are quite familiar with the semi-pro level. I think it's been a great test for those. But yeah, I think the Ospreys sort of took this as a bit more as how we all thought it may be sort of structured with a few more first teamers than sort of academy.
I mean, for one, I did not expect the result in this game when I saw the Ospreys team lineup, barring probably the centres, which didn't actually play a great deal. They had some really strong players in there. Steph Thomas, James Bender, Will Greatbank, is it Greatbank? Yeah, Lewis Morgan, Yeston Hopkins. These are all boys that have featured prominently at URC level. So to see the Dragons coming out on top of them, that must have done the wonders for the boys' confidence down there. If I just come back onto that centre issue, they played Connor Moyes of Aberavon and Tom Florence of Bridgend in the centres. Now I know Florence had a few games there, but predominantly both wingers, playing them both in the centre, and they both got injured inside those first 5 minutes. So that must have been heartbreaking for them, heartbreaking for their clubs. I haven't seen any updates on them, so I hope both boys are doing all well. One highlight I did see was again Lloyd Lewis. It's always Lloyd Lewis when it comes to a highlight in the game. Taking a try, catching was it? I think it was a high ball in the actual try line, scrapping off a couple of defenders. So it goes to show that even when you're up against higher opposition, these SRC boys, they can more than hold their own and they can come out on the front foot. So it would be great to see these boys given more of a chance with the regions. We have this whole ideal of chucking kids away, because they are kids when they're 21, 22. I know we're working on changing that right now, but once they hit 25, 26, they're finally established players in what is the top flight below professional rugby. Why not throw it to them? They've shown what they can do now. Like, I've no doubt that Lloyd Lewis, among many others, could more than handle stepping up to URC level. Like, I'm not saying they're going to be European champions. Like, no one is saying that right now. But there's no reason why they can't go into a professional setup and show they can do a job.
I think it's probably in the stage where we would see a lot more of these players picked up, even if it's on a short-term contract that doesn't tend to go anywhere. Um, if the budgets were there. You tend to see players get picked one or two games. You're then sort of sure that they look promising, but they just can't commit to putting a 12-month contract, 24-month contract in place for somebody when budgets are so tight. And if that doesn't pay off, all of a sudden, even a mediocre salary of 30 to 50K frees up on the markets. A significant amount you can put towards somebody else that's a bit more assured and sort of proven.
100%. So that's all the action that happened while we were off. It was a long break. It felt long. I know we only missed 2 weeks on the podcast, but it felt like an absolute age. I'm not gonna lie there. So we do have some rugby to talk about. The SRC kicks back off this Friday with Bridgend hosting Carmarthen Quins. Now, looking at how both sides tailed off towards the end of the last block, it's kind of hard to see where this one is going. Quinn's taking a bit of a hefty loss against Ebbw Vale, and Bridgend kind of slumping off in these last few games. I think that's now 2 losses on the bounce after doing the was it no, not the double? Sorry, my mind's everywhere this week. I'll get used to it, people. I'm really sorry. After
Double over
sneaking,
spot, he beat
yeah,
Aberystwyth.
yeah, sneaking that win over Aberystwyth when realistically Aberystwyth should have kicked for the win. So I'm struggling to see where this one is going to go. It's interesting. It's on a Friday night. As far as I know, it's not being
Yeah,
streamed or covered live by S4CS Federec, which is unfortunate. I have been badgering them to try and get us some games, but what hope have we got against the giant cog, another spoke on the wheel sort of thing. So who's coming out on top on this one? Do you think Bridgend are going to pick back up, or are Carmarthen Quins going to get that away win?
yeah. So I think it's probably a difficult one to say. I mean, both sides probably wanted that break at the right time, struggling for a bit of form, needed to sort of break and regroup. Um, I'm tending to go with Bridgend on this one. I think having someone like Florence back in the mix would be a massive boost. Even if the Ospreys released him onto the sort of the bench. But I sort of feel that Bridgend are the sort of side that are going to pick wins up now at home. They don't seem the strongest against the top sides, but I think Quins at the moment they're a bit inconsistent in what they're sort of delivering, and I think it's just settling back down at the moment. So I think just about. I think this is going to be one of those games that could be very much a 30-28 sort of style, very open. A lot of players itching to get back out there. But yeah, I'd be going for Bridgend. Like I said, I think it's a shame that they haven't had a capacity to televise this one. Obviously, they've moved it from the Wales game on Saturday.
Yeah, um, and we just discussed those. Apologies for the cough, and my little one's not very well behind me. Uh, so we look at those development games. So obviously, Bridgend have had a few players who've had some game time in the last few weeks, and Carmarthen a little bit before. So I'd say, when you got the likes of, Ben Burnell, Ryan Wilkins, Tom Florence, to say if he is, fit and ready to come back, they've had that game time in the last few weeks. They will be more finely tuned. This is one of the reasons why I don't like breaks this long. I understand a week break, 2 weeks in some instances for whatever reason. But when you're talking 3 week breaks, this is when your form and your match fitness. Because you ever play the game, anyone's ever play the game, well, there's a massive difference between fitness and match fitness. These are the sort of, once you hit that 2 week mark, that's when things start to change. So I would think Bridgend are probably in the better position right now. And being at home, I'm gonna back them against the Carmarthen side. Is probably gonna turn out and win now. I'm really annoyed at myself that I've just backed Bridgend. Well, you got to risk it sometimes, haven't you? Okay, next game, and this is the big one, and this is where I'm gonna just lay you have it. Newport travelling down to see Ebbw Vale.
So, firstly, the SR Shield is back on the line this week. The first time since RGC travelled down. So that's best part of 2 months, to be honest, if you include the break. But I think this is the juggernaut tie of the round, and possibly the season so far. I feel like the only other tie that's come close is probably Newport Pontypool the other week, but it doesn't quite maybe have the same sort of feel. Or the Newport Llandovery, I think, because the Llandovery's form may have just slightly gone under this one. But I think it was 9 tries in a row for Ebervale before the break. Yeah, they racked up 3 6-pointers in a row, starting to sort of it's difficult to say it's playing good rugby, but it's not good rugby that you imagine the ball being thrown around, right? It's good rugby in the sense of they know their strength, they're playing to it, and it's going to be very interesting to see how Newport front up. I think I was quite clear in the last pod that Newport only had one good 80-minute haul this season, and it came right before the break. Now, they're not a sort of side I don't think that lets 3 weeks down ruin their momentum. They're going to be hitting it straight back up. Now, obviously, they won this tie at Ebervale last year and then absolutely obliterated Ebervale in the semi-final of the league playoffs, which they'll be massively buoyed by. But I, I got to say, I think the conditions may slightly help Ebervale here. This 3 inches of snow fell the night before last, which is, I think, it's not a shock to anyone who knows Ebervale weather, right? But it certainly helps in slowing down Lloyd Lewis slightly. So I think this is going to be that battle of the pack, and I know it's maybe sometimes overdone, but this is very much this is the biggest tie in Wales this week. This fuck the game that's in Cardiff. This is the big one, right? This
No, 100%.
no, everybody knows the result of the one that's taking place at 20-6 in Cardiff. This is the sort of tie that goes either way, but I just got to say, I think with the conditions the way they are, it's at Ebervale. The shield is on the line. I'm going Ebervale by less than 3 points, I think, on this one. It's that sort of close game.
Oh, he's gone for the scoreline as well. Oh, we're liking this.
I'm turning in.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, I'm 100% with it. This is the Titanic clash of the SRC so far, and it's coming in the first game of the second block, which again, being in blocks is not always a bad thing, but it's nice to have something to really look forward to now this week. This is there's not enough words to really describe what this game is going to mean. Yes, we had that Pontypool Newport game, but like you said, that was a different feel. This feels like a proper heavyweight clash waiting to come. And those two games, that Llandovery and Pontypool loss, that's hurting Newport right now. We all know that's hurting Newport, and they need to come out and make a statement. Even though they won what 5 games? Sorry, 4 games. The abandoned one as well. I forgot about that one. They've looked really calm, like second, third gear, and most of them, like you said, they haven't really given a proper performance yet. They need to churn that out. And something that's interesting is obviously we go back to those two development games. Newport have had a few boys playing over the last couple of weeks, not just the 1 week, they've had them for 2 weeks. So their form and their match fitness is still going to be there. Weren't exactly many Boo's boys involved in those games, so it makes you wonder what's going on when you come to that front. But yeah, Eberville's Mall. Oh wow, I don't think you can argue against it at the minute, and you add the element into it, like you just said. Within that time of year with forwards, it's cliche, but forwards win you games, and that's exactly what I think is going to happen. I think the Eberville pack is going to ground out every bit of inch on that ground and take Newport down. Really, the the only the only thing I can see saving Newport is actually surprisingly rain. I think if if the ball gets slick enough and the forwards can't hold it in, that I think that's the only really chance Newport. If it's a light drizzle, Eberville under a centre. If it starts thumping down, then I honestly I could see Newport getting a few transition tries and really taking that game. But yeah, I'm gonna have to back Ebu just like you. So 2 games down. We're into the next one now. So what are we thinking when another would have been a titanic clash if Llandovery had picked up form a bit earlier. But Llandovery at home to Cardiff. Now, this was a final from a couple of years ago. Llandovery, again, very much like Newport, they're not getting out to third gear. So Cardiff, we know their backs just destroy everyone so far. So where's your head at for this one?
Well, I think this is one of those scenarios, and a couple of the games you've mentioned so far are probably on that verge of we've had 3 weeks of solid rain. It's going to start changing the game plan from where it was that we saw last. Obviously, Llandovery have now got the artificial surface up at Church Bank, and as you say, this is an exact replica of last year's semi-final, which was up at Church Bank, and that was a relatively close tie, given Llandovery's sort of prowess towards the end of last season. So I'm really interested by this. Llandovery started to show a lot of signs towards the sort of the end of the first block of fixtures of being the side that they were last year, digging out big moments. They seem to be now settled, them and the Scarlets, in me and Davis both playing at the same time. And it's that sort of difference maker now where you start to look and go, okay, if they can start kicking in, we always know that the ever presence of people like Lee Reese are always going to be really good. So I'm really interested to see what sort of pack Cardiff get for this game. It's been a relatively quiet fixture phase, and will the internationals call ups? Well, have they called many sort of the players that are fringing into Cardiff, sort of RFC territory, into training camp, and are they going to be released to this sort of fixture? But I would have personally, I'm going with another home win here. I think this is a second loss for. I know it's boring, it's boring. Let's just end the pod here. Let's just give it up. But yeah, it's for me. I think Llandovery now was at that side that started to transition. They're exchanging into a side that they were maybe not as good, but they're transitioning. They're into that sort of home is home. We don't lose you now. You can start to see the performances, individual and team, coming through. But I'm interested to see the Cardiff pack on this. This is probably one of them ones that we mentioned before where the team news probably changes who you go for. I mean, I'm going Llandovery, but if Cardiff come out with Delarue and all that in the back row, then all of a sudden, you're sort of going, this is a Cardiff win all of a sudden. So yeah,
Yeah,
if Mackenzie Martin wants to play this weekend, and if he's listening to the pod, then he could skip on my predictions for the weekend and put a spanner in the works.
yeah. This is exactly like what we said repeatedly. We talk about that Cardiff first team, and then we talk about the rags. And you've got the likes of Reece Barrett, Joe Cowell, Will Davis King, Evan Daniel, Gwilym Bradley, Lucas Delarue, like you mentioned, and Mackenzie Martin. Realistically, obviously three of them are props, so they can't have them all. But you could have all of them in your match day 23, and it's not. I can't see it happening, and I'm not wishing it to happen. I'm just going to make that clear by you know, 2, 3 of those players, and it starts to change the tide. You know, we we've seen it all season. Like I still kind of not wrapping my head around how Cardiff actually ended up losing down at Carmarthen. Based on all the other results, especially the reverse the week after. But if I move on to Llandovery and really try and big them up, they've they have found a way to start grinding results again. It did come to that point. That double loss against Webby Vale really shook them. You know, I would imagine, after the last 2 years where they've been more or less untouchable, they got a bit complacent. I know it's not, something we usually say in sport, and something for a team that I'm following and I want to be successful. I think they sort of thought that they could just turn up and beat teams. They probably thought, oh, RGC is just a blip, and then Edwardsville, we lost to Edwardsville. Oh, hang on, we've lost them twice now. What's going on here? So it seems those gears have started getting into motion, and the tide is turning. Good win over Newport. Realistically, that should have been a 6 point. I'm still annoyed at that Llandovery defence for letting Newport come back into that game in those last few minutes. You know, good solid win over Swansea, but like we said, Swansea have had issues all season. And then the Aberravon game where that was nip tuck. That if we saw the Llandovery side, sorry, from the Ebbw Vale games, from that RGC game, then I don't see Llandovery picking up that win there. So they are most certainly on track, and at home, like you said, the pitch is a factor. They both should be used to it by now. So it's going to be fun to see some exciting running rugby. One good bit of news for Llandovery, for the Scarlets and Welsh rugby in general, is Tian Sparrow, who was the Scarlets under-18s captain last season. He finally got back onto the pitch after a long illness last week against Ammanford. So I'm not expecting him in the next in the next week or so. But keep an eye out for that name. That boy could be something special, and we already know the sort of talent that Llandovery have in that back row. I mean, they pulled in Evan Sheldon this year, who has just appeared from nowhere, nowhere from my radar. Like I've known where he's come from. I know a few teams he's played for, but he's just shot in and he's just taken the bull by the horns and gone for it. I do think that the backs battle is the one we're going to watch out for here. Again, we've talked about how important this Cardiff team is. The likes of Tom Bowen, Elijah Evans, Austin Down. Oh, so many long names coming. Why are they double barring everything? It's always a job and a half, isn't it? But when you've got Ellis Mead, Jack Davis, we've got the stalwarts in Adam Warren and Rodri Jones, and Aaron Warren even. Toby Baldwin is one that I've really enjoyed watching this season. I know he's come from the Seventh Circuit, so
I think
most
I think Llandovery have probably got the problem at the moment that there's too many of these youngsters, right? It's you got me and Davis, right? You want to play them both, which means you cut down the wing. You've got Baldwin and Elan Phillips on the wings, which means all of a sudden one of those either doesn't play or Phillips moves to the centre, which means either you lose Warren or Jones from the centre, and you all of a sudden you can see the knock-on effect. There's just you got to lose someone, right? There's
yeah,
someone that just doesn't fit in this back line, unbelievably. That 9 and 10 with Lee Reese and Johan Hughes is already on in the bag anyway. So I think that's where Llandovery, their consistency of performances and results will come probably from a bit of consistency in that back line, I think.
yeah. I mean, we didn't even mention Aaron Warren, Harry Dole in the wing conversation there.
Yep.
It is ridiculous. I don't know how Llandovery have been able to stockpile that sort of talent. Like I can understand, probably 8 of the other 10 teams outside of RGC getting those sort of players because you're on that M4 corridor. It's so easy to get to. But Llandovery being so far out there, how they've got this much talent is more than a credit to what that backroom staff does and the culture they really have built there. But
Yeah.
we have said in the past that halfback, especially 10, is a bit of a weakness for them. We haven't seen much of Steph Jack Jones for Llandovery recently. We saw him in that Scarlets development game, but they are really focusing on Jack Maynard, George McDonald, and another one who turned out for that Scarlets development game. It's good to see them take a look at him. I mean, personally, if from a Scarlets perspective, if we've taken on Evan Jones from RBC, I want Lee Reese as well. You can't. If you're gonna take a 9 from the sort of RBC is sort of affiliated with us anyway. You've got to take Lee Reese if you get the chance. He just does some magic things. But yeah, I think it's safe to say that we both gone for a home win. But yeah, this is why we need the other boys here. It's not as much fun with just the two of us. So both of us going for Llandovery wins on that front, which brings us to game 4 of this one, which is Pontypool against Aberravon. Ooh, this is another tricky one. We've said for a little while now, where is Aberravon's win going to come from? They're not playing particularly bad. They're just not getting over the line. Is this going to be the game where we see Aberravon pick up that second win?
Do you know what? I think it's one of those ones. I think firstly, I think anyone who doesn't know, Pontypool's team manager was taken into critical care not so long ago. So fingers crossed, he's on the road to recovery. And as a wider part of that, hopefully it doesn't affect the Pontypool camp too deeply performance wise. But I think Aberavon targeting where they need to go is these are the sort of fixtures that you can get into. I think Pontypool, if anything, are a team that are momentum based. Now that everyone likes a bit of momentum, but Pontypool are one of those sides. If they get a bit of momentum, they can beat everybody between Cardiff and Swansea, right? In this table, but they're a bit stop start, a bit of a slow start. And last year they lost momentum at times, and then had this sort of flurry of sort of wins. I think Aberavon know where their strength are lying. They're starting to get a few players back. Obviously, you mentioned the Moyes injury. If he's not back, that's a bit of a blow. But I think the big difference and the big return for them has been Joe Gage in midfield.
100%, yeah.
He has been the catalyst in Aberavon starting to look like the Aberavon we sort of know. Your playoff contenders. I know there's playoffs for everybody this year. Boo, sorry everybody. WIU was shit and bad. But I
Who
think
knows?
this is the sort of he's the catalyst of them getting back going. And I think him up against Mahoney in midfield, and it was not a direct matchup, but that's going to be something really, really tasty. So hopefully Joe does get a start. But yeah, this is going to be a lot closer. I'm still back in Pontypool, another home win, boo. But I genuinely think that this is a game that Aberavon will target, right? Um, yes, you speak to any of the Aberavon coaching team players, they'll say, "Oh, we target a win every single week we play." Yeah, everybody does that. Sometimes you got to be a bit more selective, right? But this is genuinely one of those games. Get stuck in. The conditions are going to level it out. Pontypool have been utilising the backline really well this season. Kieran Meek's been an absolute fire. But I think what we learned from the Swansea game with Pontypool just before we took the break on the TV was, yes, they ran away with it in the last 20 minutes. They won't do that against Aberavon, but they need to play to the conditions, assuming that the sort of the heavy pitch is going to stay where it is, and if they get a bit of a wind, you've got to play into those sort of conditions. You can't be just assuming you're going to run the ball, and maybe that was a respect thing against Swansea, and they won't do it against Aberavon, but. This is one of those ones. I think if anybody's a betting person and wants that sort of bit of an upset this week, this is probably the only game I can see a true upset. I mean, I know we've mentioned the first two games are sort of close decisions, but I don't think they're an upset if they go either way. But yeah, I'll stick with Pontypool, but I think that this is an Aberavon target.
Yeah, I agree with you on almost everything, but except I'm gonna be different. I'm gonna go for the Aberavon win year, in honor of our friend John.
John, is that you?
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking at the team sheet, from the season so far, and this more or less settled. Obviously the Moyes injury does, bring up some issues, but they still got obviously Gage, as you mentioned, too. Captain Gage, he does everything. You've got Frankie Jones, you've got Sam Jardine. Even when you're looking at the Brad Roderick, they've got a good stock of centres in it to pick from. Their back three is really nice. If obviously if we could get him back, you could get Moyes, Lewis Jenkins, and Del Nevo. You get those three together, which I think has only happened on two occasions, and one of them was their only win. That's great for them. The one thing I'm trying to pick at for you in the back line is I don't think they really 100% sure on who they start in nine is. Like, Hogan's had was it four starts, Seawood's had two, Scott Whitlock, another academy boy who's looking well. He's had a start. I think uh, that might be something holding them back a bit. I think if they could just settle on, this is our nine. Even if it's just saying, okay, you've got these next four games, and then we'll reassess from that point. Let someone have that shirt, let them have it with confidence, rather than having the knowledge. Okay, if I make a dodgy pass or if I make a little mistake, my spot in the team could be gone next week. We know Aberavon's a young squad, and something that especially young players need is certainty. And if you can say 100%, barring any freak injury or whatever, this shirt is yours for X amount of games. Any sort of anxiety that you have of making those mistakes, it just disappears. And this is something that I've experienced myself. I spent my first year of senior rugby basically being told, I'm on the bench. When I go on, don't fuck up essentially. And when you have that on your shoulders, it affects you. I had a different team the next year, different coach, and said, look, there you go. We got 4 friendlies per year. You're going to start the last 2, and then you're going to start the first 2 league games. Go have some fun. And fucking, it's some of the best rugby I've played. At 19, that's what belief and faith can do to young players. They've already got the talent because they're there. That's the simple enough fact. If they weren't good enough to play this level, they wouldn't be there. That's something we need to state across all levels of rugby. If they were not good enough, they would not be there. If you weren't good enough for Wales, you wouldn't be in the Wales squad. It's not, it's not opinion based. It's just fact. These players can do things that the others can't. End of. And these boys can do things that Premiership players and Championship players haven't quite attuned to at the minute. So yeah, Aberavon, back in them. John will be proud of me. I haven't really talked about the forwards, and he loves talking about the forwards, but I'm going to leave that special subject just to John. So that brings us to our final game of the round, and seeing as it is at home for RGC, it is quite hard to see anything other than a win for them against a winless Swansea. So, does Swansea have anything tangible to grasp on to say we can win this one?
Probably nothing tangible. But I think the good thing, the last couple of performances, especially against 2 good sides in Llandovery and Pontypool, they've been in the game at the hour mark.
Yeah.
Now, realistically, if they're in the game at the hour mark against RGC, ordinarily you would probably say they're in with a shot. What they've got to be careful of here is RGC with their artificial surface, and they've got bags of pace. They've one thing that we've seen this year is they go quick wides. They're not a narrowed attacking team at all. It's literally as close as you can get to spread offense for American football fans as I think you can get in rugby. It's literally chuck the ball wide, and the players they've got are doing it really well, right? I mean, Sam Stoddard, was it 6 tries he's up to this season? It says it all. They've got point scorers all over the place. Billy McBride's come back, and he's been slotting points over left, right, and centre. I think that's Swansea's game plan. They need this tight. They've got to do the basics right. They have been doing it for the hour, but let's not lose the heads. They need a bit of composure. Keep the set pieces slow play down, right? Tactically slow it down so you're not rushing, or you're not rushing defensively, because that's the one thing. I can't remember who mentioned it. It might have been Joe. They said that the pressure they put in the defensive position is it's non-existent, right? There's no blitz. Everything's half-assed, half pace. You can't afford to do that. RGC the sort of side that if in 1 or 2 phases they can find that gap and rip you apart, and that's 2-3 tries in the last 20 minutes. So for me, home is where the heart is, and I've just gone for 5 home wins, which I think is the first time anyone's done that this season. So I'm bound to end up with bloody 1 win in 5 or something now, and go from there.
Well, I'll have to check our records, but you could well be right on that front. I mean, Swansea, we know they haven't hit anywhere near their potential. Still hoping that they can get some parachute players in. Morgan Morse is someone who we've barely seen, and he does have a big impact. Like we've already said many times, this isn't the RGC from the last few seasons where they get under the cosh a little bit, they sort of roll over. They're not. They're winning, especially their home games. They're putting up a fight away from home, which again, is not something that we've probably seen from them since their early promotion days. So this is definitely going to affect my prediction score, but I'm going to back Swansea just so we can have a bit of difference. And I
Shock-
just want everyone to have a win. That's all we want. Everyone to have a little win.
Shocking that this
Um,
pod was supposed to be partisan.
uh, just a point for RGC. Now they haven't chopped and changed much of their 23 at all. In most cases, keeping either their 15 or their full 23 in some cases the exact same game on game, only making enforced changes. Now again, I'm talking too much about these development games, but in the Scarlets, on the Scarlets bench was Dylan Alford, which is a Bethesda boy, an RGC player, an academy contracted player. He's finally back fit. You know, he played for Bethesda 1 week, Scarlets development the next. We could see him break into this RGC squad or at least get some sort of minutes. So I'm interested on that front just to see more of these academy boys involved because that's what this is all about. We want to see the academy boys going forward. So that brings us to the end of previewing round 8. If you've made it this far, if you like what you're hearing, give us a like, share, subscribe, comment. We love the engagement. Now, I don't know how much you know about this, Rob, because obviously you were new to our podcast family. But the sort of main podcast is called RAPS, or Welsh Regional Rugby Appreciation Podcast, and I've had to sub in for the last few weeks, and people have been really interested in some of my comments, and mostly my team sheets, which some people might think are way out there. But I made a comment on this week's about potentially turning the SRC fully professional, and a few people have jumped onto that. So I thought I'd try and it's not a full working pitch, but I thought I'd try and throw it you. So the basic premise idea, we've got our pro regional. They're in the URC. We know what they are doing. But below that, if we can turn the SRC professional, if we can say get 30 players contracted, around 30k each, supplement that with 10, 15 regional academy boys, you can get a squad in there. So I'm thinking you put those numbers together. Someone actually did it for me on the night, which was brilliant. I already knew everybody chucked it together anyway. It was 9 million. So 9 million for 10 playing squads essentially. Do you think that's something that's really feasible? Now, I'm expecting that this would come mostly from WRU funding. Obviously, they're in a shit place because of their own doing actually. But would you like to see an SRC that's fully professional, and it would have to be along those lines of the same sort of money that the academy players are on, because the moment you start battling with other teams for players, it happens everywhere. Wages rise out of control. It's something we've seen in the program of every sport. So it would essentially turn into what I'm assuming is very much like college sport is in America. They get a scholarship. That's it. You play there. End of. You can swap it, but you're not getting any more for your money. You're not going to get paid more. So can we do it? Can we make the SRC professional?
No, end of pod.
Oh,
No.
end of it.
Do you know what? It's a difficult one because the term professional, when it came around in 1996, was, or for when it came around for rugby union in 1996, supposedly, was the paying of players to have that as their career. But I think it's a difficult one in the sense of the professionalism isn't just about what someone's paid, it's about the culture, the work. I mean, you only got to look at some of the setups the sides have in terms of gym facilities or non-match days and on all of that sort of side of thing. And it becomes a very melded case of where is the limit in terms of where you start throwing money at players who aren't going to make it, or where does it leave the league in terms of the onus of development versus sort of community status. And I think a lot of people worried that the SRC was a possible loss of culture and identity. It's been proven that that's not the case. But I think if you start pushing, let's just let's just say 700k of that 900k rough sort of funding has to come from the union. So everyone gets a flat 700. All of a sudden, you can imagine how that's trying to be spent and how you allocate it, and it's a difficult one. I think it's the problem we've got is not the financing in terms of closing the gap to um yes, it's not the gap to pro is the financing. Yes, you want to put more money in. If you give everybody 10 million quids and say, all right, let's put this back into to Welsh rugby, it can be done in so many different ways. But yeah, it's surprising what physically comes around with the professional sort of status. Um, but yeah, I think it's a bit of a difficult one. I think it's probably a non-starter, but it drives the Welsh rugby mad public on Twitter insane and gets a lot of Pontypridd supporters riled up. And Mark Roberts will probably put a statement out saying about how good the Welsh Premier is and how shit this idea is. So if it causes chaos and turn the screw on a couple of people, then I'm all for it.
Dude, I was expecting some positivity from you. Then I was expecting to go, yeah, let's get everywhere.
Oh, sorry, I should have added at the end home win. Is that? Yeah.
Nah, I think personally for me, I think it's something that not anytime soon because, like you've already said, there are a lot of issues with facility, and I'll be honest, there's a lot of trust issues, especially between the union, between the clubs, and there are a lot of things we need to get right. But I think if you do it properly, you do get it structured, you do get it in a place where they can't put money aside, they can't put money in different places. It does only go on what it's meant to go on. Then, if we could say
Yeah.
possibly, yeah, that is the case. If we could make it a case of literally making this, it wouldn't be a 9 to 5 because you don't want to work 9 to 5. No rugby player wants to work 9 to 5. I mean, that's fine. And you want it to be more family based anyway. Any workplace you want to be more family based. If we can get, even if we say if we can get the likes of Lloyd Lewis on a full time contract, it's only 30k, then it makes the step up into those regions so much smoother, so much easier. And I think that's why my belief in we need to at least try. Like it won't be anytime soon. I honestly think 10 years would probably be a push, just because I think the damage that's been done at the union to get the sort of funding required is not really a thought at the minute. I would just I want to see something better. I want to believe that there can be something better, not just for us watching, but for the people involved. We've seen it with the women recently on how poor they are treated, and we are literally talking outside of what 200 rugby players in the country. They're not treated, very well in the grand scheme of things. You look at what people working maybe what 4 hours, 6 hours for some random shop. They get you get treated with some form of respect. You get treated, oh yeah, this is your job. You are, you're doing it, etc. So it will go both ways. I do want to see it. I am going to work towards the pitch just to try and turn your mind. I don't think I am going to turn your mind, but it's going to be fun for me working towards that. And one thing would like, I would really like to see is the SRC clubs take on some form of academy or system of their own. Obviously, work in conjunction with your region, but from do a shield age, even into under 16s regional, under 18s, we lose too many players. I think everybody can agree on that front. I mean, we got 26. I think it's actually 27, 28, something like that. do a Shield side, but we've only got 8 or 10 if you include RGC. We've only got 10 under 16 squads, so we're losing half the player pool in the space of 6 months because of the way they've restructured the Do a Shield.
Yeah.
You know, when we're in the December, we've got 28 teams worth of players. In the January, we've only got 10. You know, that's you're taking almost 66% of your playing squad gone. So there's always issues to deal with, and we'll come on to them in the future because it's fun. We won't talk about Wales because who wants to talk about Wales?
Yeah.
Thank you for listening. It's been great talking with you again, Rob. Great to be back. I'm sure we'll have a lot more positivity in the weeks to come when we can actually watch some real rugby again.
Yeah.
Thank you everyone for listening, and we'll catch you in the next one. Bye for now.